An Introduction to Chapter 3, Good Governance and Checks and Balances.
In what way can it be determined whether countries are practicing good governance?
Good governance can be determined on the basis of 8 criteria developed by the United Nations. Namely, these are accountability, transparency, responsiveness, equality and inclusiveness, effectiveness and efficiency, rule of law, participation, and consensus orientation.
Are democracies, as found in the United States, prime examples of good governance?
As you can see, democracy is not a criterion. However, democracy has a positive effect on criteria such as transparency and participation. Aside from these, there are other instruments that contribute to good governance. An instrument, for example, is a free press, which acts as a watchdog, ensuring transparency in government and offering citizens greater access to participate.
But isn't it fair to assume that the United States is an excellent example of good governance?
In general, the United States does well when compared to other countries. Think only of participation, accountability, rule of law, and transparency as good examples. However, there exist certain aspects of good governance in the United States which are questionable. An interesting subject for discussion is consensus orientation. The United States has a de facto two-party system. This means that the party in power is basically calling the shots, which sometimes results in the repealing of laws that were put in place by a former administration. The lack of consensus indicates that the democratic system is not functioning properly, and parties are less able to develop effective policies.
What elements of good governance are challenging for countries?
Putting the challenges on paper to achieve good governance is easy, but finding the instruments needed to put the challenges into practice is the hard part. In my opinion, just reading headline news with an almost constant barrage of attacks on government failings makes issues such as rule of law, participation, transparency, and accountability the obvious choice and priority.
What measures can be taken to get good governance?
In order to obtain good governance, it is important that the government itself creates the conditions for this. What is important is whether there are instruments that have a positive effect on the integrity of the government's institutions. To put it simply, does the government accept checks and balances and countervailing power?
Could you give an explanation of the concept of checks and balances and countervailing power?
Checks and balances in the U.S. serve to prevent one branch of the government from holding too much power. It is important that the government itself has systems to prevent abuse of power. Checks and balances finds its origin in separation of powers, in which the government itself is split into 3 parts, namely the executive, legislature, and judiciary. Legislative power is vested in the Congress, so citizens can vote in politicians as their representatives. What this all means is that the executive cannot determine the laws themselves. This also relates to anti-corruption legislation that is applicable to politicians and government institutions. Independent judicial power provides opportunities for correcting executive power if they use their power in an improper way. In addition, the government must give space to countervailing power in the public domain.
Can you explain what is meant by countervailing power?
Countervailing power is the power exercised by organizations and protest groups in response to the power of the governing elite. The free press is important in this case, but also, for example, labor unions, independent scientific institutes, and various NGOs. So, for a country to be objectively informed, it is important for it to have a high level of investigative journalism and organizations willing to question the government's actions. Also, the interest of workers and minorities must be given a voice. Groups and individuals should have the right to organize themselves and must have equal opportunities to information transfer, And in government, no one person or department should have absolute control over decisions, in addition to roles and responsibilities being clearly defined.